All right, I'll be tying the Old Man Dave, and this is going to be tied on a size 12 nymph hook, standard gap. What I'm going to use is some orange 6/0 thread, or something in the 140 denier would be fine. I've got some lead wire that we're going to wrap on the hook shank, and spiky squirrel dubbing that we'll use. Mallard flank for a tail or a wing case, or not a wing case, a tail, and then we'll use some partridge feathers for a soft hackle. This is a great fly to use when you're looking for some sort of a merger. You've got bugs on the water, you can't really tell what they are. This is going to be a subsurface pattern because it's slightly weighted. So we're going to start by putting 5 or 6 wraps of the lead wire on the hook up towards the eye. And that's going to just weight it slightly. And then using our orange thread, I'm going to start the thread right behind the eye, build up a thread dam, catch my wire, and then build a slight ramp behind and in front, just so that we can make a nice clean on and off of that. I'm going to tie my thread down to the bend of the hook, where I'm going to put in my tail. The tail is going to be this wing feather here. And I'm going to take the wing feather and I'm going to grab it by the middle barbs right at the tip. And then I'm going to fold that back. And this first one, I'm going to cut out those fibers. You'll see why in just a second. So what that's going to do is it's going to make a split tail for me. So I'm going to take that, probably 5 or 6 of those barbs for either side for a split tail. And if I stroke that back, you can see the tailing fibers and how it makes a V. I'm going to tie that in on the tail. And in the water, that's going to look like a wing case of a bug that's emerging. Couple wraps, make sure it's tied in nice and tight. Then I can snip that off. Make sure you cut off on top of your hook, not underneath, because you don't want to snip your threads. Get rid of this extra tailing here, and then that feather I can use for 2 or 3 more flies until those barbels get a little bit too long for that wing case, and it starts to look a little bit goofy. All right, so now I'm going to dub a body, and up to you, personal preference. If you like to use wax, use a little bit of wax. I like to use wax, especially for the super spiky dubbing, just to get that in there. So we're going to add some spiky dubbing, and this is red squirrel mixed with a little bit of flash. And it's just a real, remember when you're dubbing, a real thin layer and multiple wraps with that thin layer instead of a super thick layer that goes on and is kind of globby. I'm just making a real nice dubbing noodle. Before I move that forward, I'm going to tie in just a real thin piece of wire. It could be gold wire, silver wire, copper wire. Tie that in, and that will just help reinforce our body. And then I'm just going to build that body as I move forward. I want a real nice taper, cone-shaped taper, so I can use multiple wraps. And because this is a real buggy fly, similar to a hare's ear nymph or something like that, when the fly is finished, you can use something to comb out and make it look real spiky. And the spikier it is, the better it kind of tends to fish. So I'm going to add a little bit more dubbing. Spread out my dubbing on my thread. I see a clump there, so I'm going to spread that out so I don't get too thick. If you have a rotary vise, this is a great time to use that rotary feature. Spin that on. If you don't, just make sure you use good thread control, not too long, so that you can build up a nice body. See how I'm making it a little bit thicker here. I'm going to probably do one more set of dubbing here. This is actually dubbing that was created from a red squirrel that a friend had tanned the hide for me. So I just cut it off real close to that squirrel body, get some of the underfur, get some of the spiky threads. But if you don't have that available to you, you know, the commercial spiky dubbing is going to be just fine. So I'm going to come forward. Now as I get towards the eye, I'm going to taper back down again right before I wrap my wire. I like to counter wrap that wire just to lock in those thread wraps. This is a real fine wire. Just gonna give enough of that segmentation. Wrap it a couple times at the front, tie it off, cut it off, helicopter it off. All right, so now the last thing we have to do is we need to put on our soft tackle. So we've got a good feather that we're gonna grab. I'm going to pull off all the fuzzy parts that are on the lower, the marabou of that feather, so I can use the stem as my handle. And then I'm going to grab that tip again, similar to like I did for the tail, but this time what I'm doing is I'm creating a tie-in spot. So I've got the tip of my feather that I've splayed the fibers down. I'm going to use that as my tie-in spot. Couple nice tight wraps. I can pull that forward, wrap it around, probably get 2 full turns, maybe 2.5 turns on that. I'm stroking those fibers back towards the tail. I'm going to tie that feather off. If you need to, that's a good time to grab that feather with your hackle pliers. Once you get it tied off, you can cut off the stem. Once again, pay attention to where your thread is. Now I have these that are all kind of up and around, so I'm going to stroke them back using my orange thread. And this is about the only spot you really see that orange thread. So I'm making a thread head, splays those fibers back, use my whip finisher. 3 or 4 turn whip finish. I usually put 2 of them on just to secure that down. All of that making sure you've got your proportions right so you didn't crowd your eye. And that's the Old Man Dave. Now if you wanted to make that look kind of roughed up, take your dubbing brush or something with, this is Velcro on a spike. I'm just gonna pull out some of that dubbing, or you could use your bodkin. Make it look good and buggy. Get lots of movement along with that tail pulses, the wing case pulses, lots of action in the water.